Inside Huntsville with Brenda Martin, a conversation with department heads at City Hall on streets, ball fields, public safety, and more. And also with our community partners that add economic security, support education, and enhance the city's quality of life.
Hello, I'm Brenda Martin with Inside Huntsville, and thanks for joining me today. On August 30th of 2016, the Electric Board requested to present a rate adjustment to Huntsville City Council. During the month of September 2016, the rate was presented to the TVA Board for approval. During that same period, meetings with each council member was held. If the adjustment is approved, the rate implementation will begin on February 1st, 2017. And Joe GERHDES, who is the Director of Communications for the Huntsville Utilities, is here to explain to you, our viewing audience, why it's necessary to make an adjustment in our electric rates. Welcome, Joe, and thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure.
You're real special today. Okay, you've got some great news for us. Joe, one thing before we get started about the rates, talk to us about the relationship, the difference between Huntsville city government and Huntsville Utilities. A lot of people get that confused.
Okay, very good. Huntsville Utilities is a municipally owned utility. Often you'll hear us say we're a public utility, public power. We are owned by the city of Huntsville. However, we are not taxpayer funded. We are governed by two boards that are appointed by the city council. And that's a very important dynamic. Among municipal utilities, there are about 3 different models. And this is the one from a staff perspective that I've found to be preferred because that separation of government is very important for our financial management.
Okay.
So it's ideal, I believe, in our case.
In our case. Thank you so much for that explanation. We're going to talk in depth the details, but the one question that you and other officials, I'm sure, are going to be asked consistently is, why an adjustment? For what reason?
The most simple way to put it is the cost of doing business is increasing. That's really at the root of all of this. I've got some figures with me here where we can demonstrate that the cost of the equipment and the materials that we need to provide the services that we do have, at the lowest extent, gone up about 7.3%. I've got a figure here that the most dramatic is a substation transformer, which we can't get the electricity to your house without transformers.
Okay.
Since 2010, we've seen a 29.4% increase in the cost of that piece of equipment. We have to keep up with that because we're municipally owned. We're a not-for-profit utility. So if the numbers don't work, we don't work.
Okay.
We have to keep everything balanced. But we are not-for-profit. We do not answer to shareholders. We answer to our ratepayers, our customers. And so we do our very best job to make sure that we keep the system running as efficiently as possible, keep costs as low as we can to provide a high level of service that our customers expect.
And when we talk about customers, what kind of numbers are we looking at?
On the electric side, which is what we're talking about here rate-wise, we're around 182,000 residential and commercial industrial customers.
Okay. Joe, speak to us about the Huntsville utility rate today.
Well, the rate today, oh gosh, you're asking me to rattle something off the top of my head, but what I can explain is among our peers in the valley, there is only one other utility that has lower rates than us, and that's Memphis. So in the area, we are the lowest, and after this increase, should council approve it, will remain the next to the lowest, in the valley. So that's very important to us. If you want to talk about the increase itself and what we're proposing, it's 2.75% to every rate class. So much simpler than what we proposed back in April. This will have just a tiny impact on the availability charge. And to better explain that availability charge, think of that as what it costs us to get the service to your house, whether you use it or not.
Okay. Joe, I mentioned earlier that the utility officials met with each city council person.
Yes, ma'am.
And the question is, did they have any recommendations for you, and how will you implement those recommendations?
And so the result you have is what we're proposing as opposed to what we had proposed back earlier this year in March, April. That was an attempt to better balance our rate-based cost and our fixed-based cost. This is strictly a rate-based approach, and what that means for customers is that leaves the power of the bill basically in the customer's hands. You'll be charged for what you use. So if you want to take steps to reduce your consumption, your bill will still go down. And that's the difference between a rate-based versus a fee-based approach. We were taking a fee-based approach back earlier in the year in 2016.
Did you find that they were acceptable to the proposal?
Well, a lot of this was done with their input. Because what we were also doing away with in the original proposal was what we call the conservation rate, which is it's a two-tiered approach to consumption, where if you use less, you're charged a reduced rate. The way a utility system has to be designed is for peak capacity. So we have to design the system to be able to handle those odd times where we're really getting hit hard for demand. So the rest of that time, we still have to have that pipe and wire out there to deliver the service, which is very expensive, but it might not be being used as much. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, yes.
So that was the why behind the fee-based approach. And there's still that pressure there.
Yes.
But this still, revenue-wise, gets us to where we need to be financially healthy and to continue to provide the services to the community that they expect and to accommodate the growth that is coming. We're steadily growing. And that's another thing that customers need to realize that the utility industry is up against that's new. We're seeing growth, but the load growth is going the other way.
What do you mean by that?
People are using less.
Okay.
People are using less electricity, and that goes back to what I was explaining about. Even though they're using less, we still have this massive infrastructure that has to be in place and has to be maintained to provide the service when people want it. And not just residential customers, but also the commercial, retail, and industry that's here that provide the jobs for the community. They are served as well, and so we have to be ready to serve to whatever level our customers need it when they need it.
When they need it.
Yes, ma'am.
Interesting. What an education.
Well, and it's easy to not think about it because, you know, as long as it's there when you need it, generally people don't think about it.
That's for sure. Well, now, let's talk now about customer input. What do you have in store in terms of getting information from the public to hear about the changes?
Okay, well, we will have a few public meetings. We will have one of our own on Monday, January the 9th at 5 p.m. in the Huntsville City Council chambers. Then we will present the same presentation to City Council at their regular meeting on the 12th.
And you'll also have a work session.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Huntsville City Council will hold a work session on the 19th where we'll discuss it further. And I expect they'll probably have some public input at that meeting. Work sessions can go one way or the other because there's no decision made at a work session.
Right.
And then we will ask for council approval on the 26th. And, you know, during public comment, that offers the public yet another opportunity to make their feelings known about this proposal.
In other areas or opportunities that you've had perhaps in making some changes, what have you found how has the public responded?
Generally, no one likes a rate increase, and we don't like having to ask for it. Ideally, if we could just toe the line and keep things as they are, we would do that. That's our mission. to keep the high level of service and to keep it affordable and consistent. However, there are regulatory pressures, there's the growth pressure, and then this really just boils down to the cost of doing business, the cost of all the materials that we need, the equipment that we need to provide the services. It's just plain gone up. And we have to keep up with that. We don't have any choice.
Don't have a choice.
No, ma'am.
What is the estimated monthly residential electric bill, and what's the impact? What does the calculation include as well?
So on average, we found, and our customer base is very diverse, but still the averages say that our customers residential customers use about 1,500 kilowatt hours per month. So generally speaking, it's going to be about a $4 increase on your monthly bill. Could be a bit lower, could be a bit higher based on your consumption. But if you have, what falls in our average, you'll notice it. But this is the least amount of pain that we could deliver to keep up with the financial needs that we have.
Now, while our utility rates in this area are relatively low,
yes, ma'am.
Okay, but our usage is high, what are the ways in which we can reduce our energy usage? And I want to know this on a personal basis, okay?
Yes,
that's, you get your bill and you say, well, did I use this much last month? And what are some things we could do?
Well, folks first need to understand that the greatest impact on their bill is the weather. And when we are extremely hot or exceptionally cold, no matter what you do, you're going to consume more unless you shut your heating and cooling system off. And most people aren't going to do that. So what you can do is just be mindful of what you're using and when you're using it. There are lots and lots of recommendations out there on what you should do. We have some tips on our website, but understanding how the weather affects your consumption will help you a great deal. Then you can do the things that I think most people know about, which adjust your thermostat, LED lighting.
Yes.
Particularly with electricity, just be more mindful of, especially during the cold months, what kind of heating system you have. If you have a gas heat, you're okay. That's not going to impact your electric use. But if you have a heat pump, which many people have, when it gets particularly cold out, heat pumps aren't very efficient. When the temperature gets low enough, those heat strips, you hear them referred to as heat strips, auxiliary heat, emergency heat, they're heat strips. It's basically, think of it as an electric space heater in your ductwork. That's raw electricity going through an undersized wire to create heat, and it's very expensive. The difference in how much electricity you're using at that point goes up about 5 times. So understanding that and knowing if it's going to be cold for a long period like we've had in some previous winters, just understand that your bill's going to be more expensive because you're using more electricity. It's not because we've changed our rates. We never do that without public notice.
Exactly.
And it's just it's the challenge that the industry has in responding to the weather. It makes all the difference to how we deliver what we deliver.
Great answer. Great answer. Thank you so much for that, because that's real. People want to know, what can I do to make a change?
Adjust that thermostat. Your water heat and your heating and cooling in your home, those are the 2 biggest users of electricity if you have electric.
Yes.
For those things. And so being mindful of how you use it.
And along those lines, I understand too, and I got this from some officials at Huntsville Utilities, if you're going to raise your thermostat, raise it 1 degree at a time and not do what I've done in the past, go from 70 to 75. And you want to speak to that?
Well, I think some people think that if you raise the heating adjustment, that the air coming out is going to be warmer. No, the air is going to be the same temperature, and it's going to keep going until it gets to the temperature you've asked it to give you.
Yes, yes.
And so when you just give it that gentle nudge, then the system can work for a minute to get you there, and then maybe nudge it again a few hours down the line. But every time you do nudge it, it's going to have an impact on your consumption
On the
and therefore your
consumption.
bill.
For sure. I've learned how to do that now. Listen, only about 15% of electric revenue pays for the operation costs. What are some of the examples of rising costs and since our last increase? And speak to, if you will, the unexpected costs that are vital to our area, which we don't think about until something happens.
Well, thankfully, we had a recent event that helps illustrate that. You may recall in late November, we had a round of severe storms.
Yes.
I don't know that it's been confirmed yet, but I believe we had one tornado in the eastern part of the county. Did a lot of damage to our system, but not so much so that the county could apply for FEMA assistance. So that money's not reimbursed. When we get that EMA reimbursement, that reduces our cost. When we don't, that falls on our customers. They fund that. So, and I'm really ballparking this, and I don't have any solid data because it takes some time to crunch those numbers. But that event basically cost us about $500,000 to respond to. A lot of equipment was damaged, and when it gets damaged, we have to respond and repair and restore, which we did. We did it quickly, too. Within 24 hours, we had all that damage repaired and all our customers were back on. But to be able to do that at the level that we do costs money, and it's supported through our rate structure by our customers. So that's an unexpected cost. And the rest of it just goes back to, we plan for those things, but we never know when they're coming. And that has to be built into the rate structure.
Into the rates,
yes, ma'am.
Sure.
And then, the other things that just creep up on you are those equipment and materials costs that we know are going to increase. Plus, we're in a growth area, fortunately. And that means we have to continue to grow our system and do the things that we call redundancy and reliability. That means we're constantly improving the system to better serve our customers so that they don't experience service interruptions. And we are rated by the American Public Power Association as a RP3, or no, it's not RP3. Yeah, it is RP3.
Okay,
sorry.
okay,
But it's an acronym that's a testament to our reliability.
Sure.
And it's not something that's easy to attain. I get often asked, especially by local reporters, if we have reliability numbers. And while that's coming, we don't have it yet at the mass level. So the way I like to explain that to people is, think about your service at your home and the last time your power was out. Then relate that to how often it's not out.
Okay.
And there's your reliability.
There it is.
Very reliable service. Water is almost never out.
That's
Gas
right.
is almost never out.
That's exactly right.
Electric is out sometimes, but it's a tiny, tiny fraction of your entire year.
Right.
Providing that level of service takes funding. Our customers fund it through rates. We do a good job of keeping those rates low. And this is only the third time since 1988 that we're asking our customers for an increase.
Talk
in their
about that.
rate.
Let's talk. When was the last rate increase that we had?
The last
Adjustment?
increase we had was in 2011.
Okay.
And prior to that, it was 2002. Prior to that, it was 1987.
Not a lot of facilities can.
That's right. But we have to keep up with those costs. Again, being not-for-profit, being municipally owned, those books always have to balance. And we think that demonstrates good stewardship of our customers' dollars. We need our customers to understand that 85% of everything they pay for electricity goes directly to TVA to provide that commodity. So this is a very expensive thing to provide to customers, and we do everything we can to keep it affordable.
And you talked some about what the rate increase will fund. Is there any additional information that you want to share in terms of what it will fund?
In the case of the electric system, it more is to accommodate the redundancy and reliability that I talked about and the growth that's coming.
Okay.
So there are some substation improvements coming. I know we're building a couple of new substations on the periphery of our service area. For those that don't know, we serve the entire county of Madison. And so we're building a substation out on Moontown Road, which if you don't know where that is, that's out
where's that?
Highway 72.
Okay.
And then we've completed some new delivery points from TVA so we don't have another situation like we did in 2011 when our transmission lines were severed. And it took a few days to get service back. So those types of things so that we can, again, keep providing that high level of service that our customers expect and deserve.
Right. One of the other things, in doing my research, I noticed that that while we're raising our rates, but as I look across the southern region, if you will, we're still on the low side.
If council approves this increase, we will remain at the low end. And a lot of our customers probably don't know. And we don't like to pick on our peers, but Alabama Power is just announced last week that they're having to raise their rates for the exact same reason we are. It's just the cost of doing business and keeping up with those unplanned expenses like storm damage, and it has to be funded. I mean, customers expect that utility to be there when they want it. And so it's our job to make sure that happens.
Great, thank you. You know, I want to give you a compliment, and maybe you can speak to it a little bit because I recall other times, if you will. Your customer service department is just phenomenal. And on a personal basis, I've had to call, and the response has been tremendous. They've shown a willingness to answer perhaps my inexperienced questions, okay? And I want to say thank you to you, and please pass that along, because that's important. That when someone is calling Huntsville Utilities, there's an issue, and we want to be received in a very positive way. Our questions answered, of course, but the way they're answered. And I want you to know it has been your customer service department everywhere. It's phenomenal, and I thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much for the feedback. We've spent a lot of time and effort to change the culture. And lots of utilities are doing that very same thing. Customers have a high expectation, and they should be treated friendly and fairly in every case, with no exceptions. And so we work very hard on that. There's a lot of training that our employees are offered, and they take advantage of that. They take a lot of pride in those kinds of comments. Thankfully, we're beginning to hear a lot more of that.
Okay,
and it's we appreciate it. We do appreciate it because we want to know that we're not difficult to deal with, and we're very aware that that has not been our history. And so we're working very hard to change that. I'm glad to hear that we're having some success.
I look for opportunities to write a good letter.
We like that, thank you.
And I found 2 occasions, okay, to write that letter.
There's one man that you and I both know who's responsible for that. He's going to be very happy to hear it.
I tell you, I'm just really, really glad that the change is there. Joe, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you
so much for taking the time, and we'll be back. I'm going to have you back for sure because you've got a lot of information to share, and this is information that our viewing audience want to hear.
Yes, ma'am.
And they need to hear.
Be happy to come back anytime.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, that's our show for today. Join me again for another episode of Inside Huntsville. I'm Brenda Martin. Have a wonderful day.